Hey friends, it's Gloria and welcome back to another video. I have a book haul for you, the last book haul of the year. Also, I haven't done one in a while. I have been very good this year and have hauled very few books and have gotten rid of a ton. So I feel good about that. I'm trying to minimize my shelves, but I do have these to add on because all of these do sound interesting to me at this moment. Let's get into the books. I have less than 20 to talk about and I have some historical, some nonfiction, some contemporary, and even some fantasy for you. So let's jump into the books. Let's start with historical, my favorite genre, always the most with my hauls. 3 new releases that came out in 2024 that I've found. First one is The Keeper of Hidden Books by Madeline Martin. I read at the last bookshop in London and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was a good mix of lighthearted and also hardship during the Blitz in London. It's like a sweet story. It was wholesome and it was impactful but not bleak and depressing. This one is also set during the war, but it is during the Nazi occupation in Warsaw. So it has to do with the Polish perspective of the war. I'm interested to read more from this author. I thought I might be done with Kate Quinn, but I found this one and I thought I need to give it a try. The Phoenix Crown. Big reason why I do want to read this is because it is set in 1906 in San Francisco during the earthquake that happens there, and I read The Natural Fragile Things set during the 1906 San Francisco earthquake and loved it. Not that this has anything to do with that storyline, but it's set in the same place, so it could be really interesting. Has to do with an embroideress and a singer, an arranged marriage, escaping a legendary relic, a crown that people are looking for. Could be really interesting, could be mysterious, could be fun. It definitely has me intrigued. I don't love Kate Quinn's books, but I do want to give this one a go. Another 2024 release, Husbands and Lovers by Beatrice Williams. I don't really have a desire to read this and it didn't draw my attention, but I found this in a little free library and I just was really interested in this blurb. It has a big hodgepodge of things going for it. So we have a woman whose son was poisoned because he's fighting for his life in the hospital. His adoption gets brought up and his parentage, which I think she maybe had an affair. That has something to do with the 1950s. And then there's also a setting in Egypt with Hungarian refugees. I have no idea how the story will be tied together. I don't like stories about affairs usually, given from the title as well as the blurb it might be a big theme. I've read one Beatrice Williams books before and I did not like it. I have another one of hers on my shelves that I want to read that sounds interesting, but I'm intrigued enough to give it a go and I might DNF it, but I don't know. Let me know if you've read this year and have liked it or not. And then I have 3 older historical titles that all sound interesting to me. March by Geraldine Brooks. I have not read Geraldine Brooks, but I've heard wonderful things. This is a slim little novel, but it is about the father's perspective from Little Women. It looks like a diary entry, so maybe it's his journal entries while he's at war. The only thing is I heard that this was quite bleak and depressing. So maybe being in the mind space of that, of like war atrocities being written. I don't know how Geraldine Brooks maybe connects it to Little Women and that writing style and that like whimsy storytelling. I mean, Little Women's also full of some heartbreaking things. I'm curious about this one a lot. I'm very interested to see where it'll go, but let me know if you read it, if you liked it. Next, I always love finding a book that I have not heard of at all. Not a single person in my life or on BookTube or any bookish thing in my life. I haven't heard this, but it sounds really good. The Flight of Gemma Hardy by Margaret Livesey. This is about a girl taken from her native Iceland to Scotland in the early 1950s when her widower father drowns at sea. Gemma Hardy comes to live with her kindly uncle and his family, but then her resentful aunt sends her to a private school and she grows up oppressed. And then she finds a job as an au pair, moves to the Orkney Islands. Mysterious remote Blackbird Hall, and the greatest trial begins. So it sounds like a coming of age, a young girl who's experiencing hardship, and then something mysterious set in Scotland in a big house. I haven't heard anything about it. Let me know if you've read it at all or have heard about it, because it sounds super interesting and gothic and mysterious and very atmospheric. And finally for historical, I found The Bronze Horseman by Paulina Simons. This is a trilogy that I have been wanting to get to for a while. It's very wintry. It is a long historical romance, sweeping saga. It's supposed to be wonderful and very romantic. It is about Tatiana and Alexander, and it's set in Leningrad, now known as St. Petersburg, and it starts when Hitler's armies attack Russia. So at the start of the Second World War. I've heard wonderful things. I would love to try this book out. I'm so curious how I would fare with it and if I'd really like it, but I've heard great things. I think it gets quite steamy. Maybe that's the problem with people, but I have a thing where if the couple is married in the book, I don't really mind the steam. I don't know. Anyways, I'm intrigued to try it. Let's move on to nonfiction, my second biggest stack of all the hauls. I have 4 Christian nonfiction books to read. The first one is John Mark's re-release of God Has a Name. God Has a Name, What You Believe About God Will Shape Who You Become by John Mark Comer, a previous Portland pastor. He used to pastor the church that I still go to, and he re-released this book, I think with some new insight about how he thinks about things. I have all of his books, and we are part of supporting the Practicing the Way nonprofit, so we got a copy of this book in the mail, which was a nice surprise. Love a naked hardback. All of his books feel amazing, and now this one matches the rest of his hardbacks on the shelf because God Has a Name used to be in paperback, which is a bit odd, but I know that's not his decision, it's publisher decision, but excited that I have a copy of his newest one. I then off of Pango bought a couple of motherhood Christian nonfiction books. The first one is Hard Is Not the Same Thing as Bad, The Perspective Shift That Could Completely Change the Way You Mother by Abby Halberstadt. I have not finished, but have started her other book, M is for Motherhood, M is for Mother, something along those lines, and it's been a really incredible read about motherhood and just the perspective, and so I feel like I want to read a lot of her books, and I do love also naked hardback. Another one is Honest Prayers for Mama Bears by Hillary Morgan Ferrer with Julie Luce. I thought that was such a fun cover. Honest Prayers for Mama Bears. Just a book of prayers and some ideas for prayers and some reflection, things to think about. We'll see if it's any good. I already read this one, but I wanted a copy of it. Celebration of Discipline by Richard J. Foster. This book is all about different spiritual disciplines, things you can do in your life to better your spiritual life and your relationship with God. Things like meditation, prayer, fasting, study, simplicity, solitude, submission, service, confession, worship, guidance, and celebration. I read this a few years back when Krista had a Christian nonfiction book live discussion about it, and I read it that month and I really enjoyed it, so I'm happy that I got my hands on it. Then I found a memoir called No Friend But the Mountains by Behrouz Boochani. This is translated by Omid Tofigan. This is about a man writing from the Manus prison. In 2013, Kurdish journalist Behrouz Boochani, I could be totally butchering that, he was illegally detained on Manus Island and has been there ever since. This book is the result. Laboriously tapped out on a mobile phone and translated from Farsi, it's a voice of witness and an act of survival, a lyric first-hand account, a cry of resistance, a vivid portrait through 5 years of incarceration and exile. I remember hearing about this from, I think, Magpie Reads. I'll link her channel down below. I believe she talked about it, or she had someone on her channel talk about it. It sounded amazing. Books like Just Mercy and The Sun Doesn't Shine, books about incarceration in America for those that were wrongfully imprisoned, were such heartbreaking but amazing reads, and this seems like a man that was wrongfully imprisoned in a different place. It's also translated nonfiction, so I'm very curious about it. I've heard incredible things, so I feel like it's going to be impactful and amazing. Next, I have 3 contemporary books that I have all read from before. The first one is Stephen King's Billy Summers. When I first started BookTube, I swore that I would never read a Stephen King because I am not a horror girly. I don't read scary books. I don't like being creeped out. I don't like supernatural, ghosty things, like just not my jam. And I know a lot of his books are pretty intense, and I don't plan to really read those, but I did read 11/22/63, which is a historical fiction time travel book by his, and was super interested in that one. That was such a trip, and I absolutely loved my time with it. And I've heard that this is another great book of his to get into, where it's not too gory and it's not too intense. It's just like a pleasant mystery, I think, with the romance subplot. I know that Haley fam, she's a big BookTube person that got into Stephen King, and she really liked it, and she reads like romance and chick lit stuff mostly. I am very curious about this one. I know it came out a few years back, so I'm definitely willing to try another Stephen King, hopefully be pleasantly surprised. Then I have a Jodi Picoult, 19 Minutes. I know she has a ton of books, and I'm definitely interested in reading some of them, but not particularly interested in like grabbing them. But this one is about a school shooting, and I've heard it's really incredible, and I for some reason want to torture myself. I do like books about school shootings because it's just so heartbreaking, and I read a few that have been incredible. It's just a theme that really intrigues me and breaks my heart, but was happy to find this one at Goodwill. Got my hands on it. Now I own it. Hope to read it soonish. And lastly, How to Walk Away by Catherine Senner. I have been really unsuccessful with Catherine Senner's most recent releases in the past 2 years. They have been both like hated books for me, but I absolutely loved The Bodyguard. This is one of her older books, and I think it was maybe turned into a mini-series. I'm not sure which one has. Maybe Happiness for Beginners, but she has a few older contemporary romance, like women's chick lit books that have been popular and well loved, and I want to give another one of hers a try. Maybe an older one of her books before I give up on her completely, because I've hated her most recent reads. And then lastly, I have 3 fantasy books here that are quite out of my comfort zone. The first one is Pod by Lillian Paul. It is typically not a book that I would ever be interested in. I heard that this is like dolphin rape porn, which I'm like, no, I don't want to read that. But I think it's more than that. This is like about ocean life and the perspective of life from dolphins, from a dolphin pod. The reason why I would read this is because her other book, The Bees, which I have right there, which is about the perspective of one honeybee in a beehive and the life cycle of that bee, was so interesting to me. I thought it was so well done. It was weird and compelling, but I do have that background with bees, so that's why that book was interesting. I am terrified of the ocean and don't really like big oceany depth things, but because of her previous book that I enjoyed so much, I'm curious about this one, even though this could have content that I really don't like to read about, like dolphin sexual assault or whatever people talk about is in here. That is super weird, but I kind of want to try it. Next, a very popular beloved fantasy world that people love is Shadow and Bone by Lee Bardugo. At first, wasn't really interested in the Grishaverse, but I feel like I could get behind a fun series. I think this also has a little bit of like Slavic vibes in it without being explicitly Russian in any kind of way, but based on their like names, and this is I think the prequel to the Six of Crows duology. Chantel from Chantel Reads All Day recently read through all these and I think liked it, and I feel like I often can gauge well from her, like if she continued to read the series and liked it, then it won't have anything in here that I might not like, but we'll see. I definitely want to try it. I might want to read more fantasy in the future. I don't know. Spread my wings. Speaking of wings and dragons, I actually have no idea what the series is about. I think it's about fairies. I also heard this is just fairy porn, but A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I've never read from this author. I didn't think I ever would. I might still not, but honestly, I want to know why. I want to know why every single person out there is reading these and loves these so much. Like I'm too curious at this point. This has permeated so much into my in real life. People that read very little in my life are reading these series and are just gripped by these series. I don't get it. I don't get it. I've heard that it sucks. Like this is not good, but I'm just too curious and I really want to try, and I know that so many people absolutely love this and are just completely compelled and want to just read through the whole thing. I think that I'm gonna hate it because I also read Fourth Wing, which was a romantasy dragon book, and it was really bad. It was really bad. I just have to try it. I just have to try this and know what all the fuss is about. And I think I'm gonna read this first book and I think I'm gonna hate it. That is my prediction. I want to kind of experience that just to finally see what all the fuss is about and why people are obsessed with the series. I just have to know. So those are all the books that have recently come into my life. They will be going onto my shelves. As always with book hauls, my favorite thing is please tell me in the comments, which one of these should I read? Which one of these should I prioritize that you've read, that you've loved? I appreciate you guys spending some time with me, watching today, and I will see you guys in more book videos soon. Bye.